shows me something exciting as we talk about kingdom leaders. You can be fruitful and have a dynamic ministry that touches thousands and thousands of lives, and yet still go deep and still be healed and still be whole and still be vibrant and still be alive. Hi, welcome to the Gary Wilkerson podcast. Glad you're here with us today. I'm in the studio with Dr. Mark Mayfield and my good friend Matthew Ward. Welcome, guys. Glad you're here with us today.
So I'm excited about this last topic because I think it's important for us as leaders to reflect on our own health.
Sure.
And not that it was a bait and switch, but leaders are probably going. So hang in with us. If you've listened to the first two, stay with us on this one because this is hard. It's vulnerable. I think we were talking off mic that, my counselor is like 45 miles away because I don't want anybody, but it's
almost far enough.
Almost far enough. But it's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable. I wrote an article for Outreach Magazine on lonely at the top, ? And I think sometimes we use that as a cop-out that, we're CEO of a company, we're the senior pastor, we're whatever, a mission organization, and we kind of just cop out of, I don't have anybody to talk to. Like, nobody I trust.
Right. Or you think you shouldn't have these issues.
Or you think you think you shouldn't have these issues. And now we ignore, we breeze through, or we placate, or we justify these struggles. So my question for the two of you, and I'll answer this as well, what barriers do you think pastors and leaders face when it comes for caring for their own mental, emotional, and spiritual health?
Well, I think, you touched on the fact that, you're seeing somebody and they're out of town, right? I think that the issue a lot of times, like you were saying, somebody in leadership, like a pastor, who's over however many people, 100 people, 1,000 people, whatever it happens to be. And in their minds, people look up to them and they need to have their stuff together because they're the leaders, right? So there's automatically that thing of, well, they don't feel safe to go to somebody and say, hey, man, I'm struggling with this, man. Who do they talk to? Because they are at the top, right? And if they go to someone, in their minds, are they thinking, that person is going to think less of me because I have these issues and I shouldn't because God's placed me in this position of leadership.
Right.
And I think those things are real. And I think that's what keeps pastors from really diving into their frailties, because they are having things put on them and they are putting things on themselves that would say, I should be above all of this.
Right.
Because I am in a position of leadership.
I should have these things figured
I should
out.
have all this stuff figured out and have it together. So they don't have the comfortable place to sort of let their hair down and go, blah, because they're going to get bit. Sheep do bite, by the way.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
If you're an unhealed pastor, you've got stuff you've never dealt with. There's brokenness. There's wounds inside your heart. If it's undealt with, it's going to show itself somewhere or another. And so, having some safe place to go to get healed yourself first. Part of that sense of being wounded, hurt. There's something I think unique. I could be wrong because I've not been in the music industry or in the therapeutic world, but so maybe it's the same, and you can let me know. But certainly in the pastoral world, you're on a stage regularly. You're getting a lot of applause and pats on the back for a great sermon, or not always, but and so wounded heart, outside affirmation, it becomes like an idol. Like I have to have that. So to be vulnerable is like, no, that's too risky. I might lose my audience. I might lose the appreciation. I might lose. So that idol becomes so strong that your soul care becomes so weak. You don't actually risk doing that. So
it's a good word, is risk. Yeah,
that's good.
I think it's the Christian celebrityism plays a lot into that. We've talked about that. Offline. Both of us. I think both of us have.
Yeah.
Of that you're right, that we on stage, and so we get some accolades. We're in a concert, we get some accolades. We have records, we have books, we have all these things, and people raise us to a level that we never asked for. And I think a lot of pastors feel that, especially if they're in a church that are bigger than 300 or 400, right? They're not the ones that are pastors of churches that are less than 300 or 400 are they're the ones going to the rest homes and the hospitals, and
Exactly.
they're doing everything. And so there's that humanity amongst them. But when you're put up on this pedestal, I think there becomes that narrative of shoulds. I can't be struggling, or if I am struggling, I can't share that. Why would that's going
That's
to
a
knock
sign
me
of
off?
weakness.
It's going to knock me off the pedestal, or it's a sign of weakness, or and yeah, go ahead.
Well, just the lack of personal care. You alluded to the fact that maybe that's the last thing a pastor wants to come to a conference to hear about.
Right.
Help me grow my church. Help me reach my city. Help me figure out how to get a better strategy. But how to help me be a man of God. Sometimes that is not as high a priority for some. It's so tragic. It's so because it leaves us in our brokenness. It leaves us in our wounds, and then it leaves us in a place where we can't be real. We can't be ourselves. We can't be vulnerable, and we're always having a guard around us, protection, so nobody really knows us,
Right.
and therefore nobody lets us know them because that's always reciprocal.
Well, I'm going to turn this on to the two of you, because I've known you both for about 3 or 4 months, in different venues, and with both of you, what you see is what you get. I've experienced you in different scenarios, at dinners and, in your homes and that kind, and so you both are very genuine. You both are very,
Thank you.
like, what you see is what you get. So how have you combated that? How have you stayed true to who you are and who God has designed you to be as a musician,
Right.
as a pastor, where you could be thrust into these, if we just sat down and made a list of everybody that you guys know and have met, it would, that people know, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You could easily get a big head and,
Yeah.
so how have you guys, in some ways, maintained what we're talking about, this right view of self and the desire to be vulnerable and to be humble and to be,
Right.
how have you maintained that?
Well, I think for me, we were talking before about, that I'm an introvert, absolute introvert. And I think it's hilarious that God raised up 3 people, me and my 2 sisters. I'm the youngest of 9 kids, but 3 of us sang together, to go out and minister to people through song and through the spoken word when we're all basically introverts.
Give me a book and put me in front of a fire and away
Right.
from people.
Yeah, I'm
and-
good.
Yeah.
I'm that guy that goes to a party and there's 30 people there, and I have friends that go meet everybody. So, what
Yeah.
are your kids doing? Yeah, I'm not that guy. I'll hang out with the 2 guys I know at the party. I don't, whatever. Yeah. So I'm not that guy. I don't press the flesh and
Right.
do all that. That is so, and I think, I don't know, it had to be part of God's design to raise up a person like me that really wanted no part of it. It wasn't
Yeah,
like,
true. Yeah.
I
You weren't
don't see myself
knocking down doors trying to,
no, I don't,
yeah.
Next week I'll be at the pump room down at the Holiday Inn. And,
Right.
no, I'm incredibly unself-promoting to a fault. I do think less of myself than I should probably. I devalue myself. Gary and I have talked about that, about some of my shortcomings and some of my insecurities and where they come from, and my childhood and all that stuff, the baggage that I've hauled around all my life. But I look back on that, and it's almost like a blessing from God that He raised me up to do what I do, because it's not something I would choose.
Right.
Right.
'Cause-
So
'cause-
that's what keeps me from getting a big head.
I love that.
Because I don't think I should even be doing it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Some people in your position, because all 3 of us have been around influential leaders. Heads of major denominations, TV producers,
no.
Christian artists. And you can take 1 or 2 routes with this thing. Your wounds from your past. You lost your parents.
Yeah.
You become famous. You can get a big head and full of arrogance, and nobody can touch me, and you start snapping at your staff. And I heard one guy say that the pastor of this megachurch said, "Man, every time I can leave his office, it's like they have to scrape me off the walls. He just blows me away.
Wow.
Just pieces of me all over the place. But to the public, these guys are like."
They've all together.
Megachurch leader, or well-known Christian author, Dove winning award, or whatever I'm saying here. But then, in their personal life, it's just falling apart. They're ask their wife who really is that person. And so, man, there's a lot of hurting pastors out there.
Yeah.
I've spoken to, I think, about 150,000 pastors over the last decade in 115 countries, and I was in Poland, and I asked the guy, I said, do you guys deal with, we were talking about a particular issue along this line, did you guys deal with this in Poland? Young pastor, and he laughed at me and goes, Mr. Wilkerson, the flesh is the flesh. There's no American flesh and Polish flesh. It's just the flesh.
It's flesh. Yeah.
And so this is an international problem and unfortunately, some people that get acclaim and honor, prestige, recognition, having those wounds that they've not dealt with, just set them up for a fall. And we see that every generation, every decade, we see a whole new crop. I can name them all back from my time with the Jimmy Swaggarts.
Sure.
Yeah.
We can name the most recent ones right now. We won't. But
yeah,
I mean,
no, we don't have to.
Yeah.
Hopefully we could do something about that.
Well, I think it's interesting, and I know in our conversations, I think all three of us have that same tendency. We're all introverts, but we're also all very much our own worst enemies.
Yeah.
Like my insecurities, I could sit there and tell you, left and right. And
Yeah.
it was interesting because I got a taste of being known. And my wounding is not being known, not being seen, not being valued, being overlooked and that kind of stuff. And I got a taste of it probably a year and a half ago. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of
This
nice.
is not bad at all.
And then about 30 minutes into it, I'm like, oh, crud. No, Because I could feel my flesh just being pulled into, this and relentless self-promotion and, all this kind of, like, nope. And my wife and I were talking about this the other day going, we're going to be faithful to where God's called us. And if that ends tomorrow, it ends tomorrow.
Yeah. This thing that you felt fed like a need in you.
It did.
And you recognize the danger of it. But that, it's interesting how like something could happen now. So somebody could criticize a pastor or a Christian leader and they get really affronted by that. They're really, really, extremely more upset at the criticism than they should be. The way that, that always goes back to, I think, what you were talking about in episodes in the past we've been talking about of, with these neural pathways of having the brain, having this highway that can be redeemed and holy, but you still have the memories of those old dirt roads in your life. And sometimes they're like triggers. It's like that disrespect. So somebody sent me an email and they're like, your last sermon was full of errors and heresy. And it's just like, I think that was a pretty sound sermon. Yep. Instead of doing that, you go like, I can't believe they said that.
What's everything I'm doing is pointless. And I got a negative review on my book the other day. It's the same thing. It
goes back to your history, right? It's not just the current thing, right?
No, for me, I got a negative review on my book the other day, and I'm in the midst of writing another one. And I walked out of my office and I told my wife, what's the point?
Why do another book?
This is so stupid. And she looked at me. She goes, "Are you serious?"
Yeah.
Like the Holy, she's the Holy Spirit in my life. She goes, "It's not about who cares what people think. This is you're doing it for And so it goes back to having people in our lives too that can speak that. And to this end of emotionally healthy leaders, like if we don't have anybody speaking into us that can like smack us over the head and speak that truth, that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you. I always heard Matthew 22:36-40, the Great Commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. I always read that as, okay, 1, God. 2, others. Whenever I get to it, self.
Down there.
Number 100 or 1,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was reading into the Hebrew, or the Greek, not the Hebrew, but the Greek of that. And the word second is like it is homoios, which means set alongside or equal to. Mm. And so if you read this, we have to have a right relationship with God, a right relationship with others, and a right relationship with ourselves equally.
Right.
And in that is the exemplification of the triune God.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So to have this conversation around how we care for ourselves as leaders, how the leaders should be caring for themselves, what would you want to say in lieu of a right understanding of this passage, where we're not, dying to the self to the point of false humility, which is actually pride, of having this right I look at it as a tire going down the road. Like you don't notice your tire until it's flat.
Right.
It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's perfectly balanced. Yeah. And so this idea of love God, right relationship with God, right relationship with others, right relationship with ourselves is kind of like this perfectly balanced tire. Yeah. But if we don't have a right relationship with ourselves, my question is, can we have a right relationship with God? Is the way we should. I don't know. I mean, I'm posing this question. I don't,
There's two types of Christian leaders when it comes to this context, I believe. The one is living kind of an imposter life. They think it's God first, and then, and as you're saying, self is last, and they feel that, but in a sense, the imposter is that self is first. They live for themselves. They live for their dreams, for their aspirations, for their hopes. People are used. They use people to get their goals met. And so there's that type of person. And the other one is exactly what you're talking about, I believe, is the person who's really has an honest heart before God, wants to walk in the Spirit, and yet feels, for various reasons, and I think there's several of them, they feel like, okay, that I can't take care of myself. I can't take time for myself. I can't take a vacation. I've got to do that, and just it really wrecks the soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a guy named he's dead now, so I can mention his name. But
yeah, no,
he was
he can't come after
late 1800s, early 1900s. Theologian A.W. Pink, one of the best scholars I've ever read on. As I've said before, I'd like to study the attributes of God.
Mm-hmm.
Very few people can touch him. A.W. Tozer can
he
he
wrote a good
pretty
book
close.
About the characters.
Yeah, but Pink's is amazing. But I read there's not much on the life of Pink, but there's this one little introduction to one of his books. One of his pastor friends wrote the introduction to his books after he had passed away. And it was really sad because he said the guy, he went through like 13 churches. They had to keep asking him to leave because he just locked himself in his study and wrote like heady knowledge things, but had no relationships with people. He didn't have an empathetic heart. He didn't have. There was no vulnerability in his preaching. It was all just core doctrine issue and stuff like that. And it kind of it's like it was one of those stories. It's like because I could find myself in that place. Like I could find myself in the scholars library and spend the rest of my life there. Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
he loves diving in and writing.
But it was
one
of those. It was one of those awakenings again.
Yeah.
So it's okay. Like that's the Lord warning me. That's a prophetic word. That I could become like that. I could. It's like the Ebenezer Scrooge. You could end that way, or you could, get Timothy to get the little turkey, and so reach out to people and be vulnerable because it's as we're talking about vulnerability, it's hard to be vulnerable. You can easily get hurt in a Christian leadership, in the pastoral role. My story is I've always been. I've been vulnerable. I enjoy it. I enjoy using story to show a truth of the Scripture. And I also found I used to travel with my father, who was a well-known preacher, and these pastors' conferences we go to, they would always say, he always gives us the model of what we should do, and you've helped us kind of realize we make the same mistakes you make, and you're honest about it. And so that was everywhere we went. That was kind of the way we were labeled and stuff. So I appreciated being vulnerable. But in a local church, I started sharing a story about one of my sons who started off smoking pot and then drinking a lot and got arrested for selling and ended up using heroin as a kid living on the streets. And as that was happening, I would ask my church to pray for me. And I was kind of saddened by it. It was like I wasn't trying to be vulnerable or trying to show a point. Just I was a man who needed somebody to pray for him.
You needed some help.
Yeah. And I'd say about 3/4 of the church were like, we're going to pray for you. We're supporting you. But probably a fourth of them said, we're going to leave the church. We don't think you don't meet the qualifications of a pastor because your children, even though he wasn't living at our home at the time.
The children who's an adult.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like he's on his own.
Yeah.
Responsibility now, but they left the church. They sent out emails to others, and tried to make a movement to get everybody to call it, and horrible hate letters, just like and I understand it. That has nothing to do even with what I said about my son.
Yeah,
and so it was about 2 or 3 years where I said, okay, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to risk saying things. I'm going to be protective. I'll use stories from 20 years ago when I used to be angry when I was 30 years old. Yeah.
So let me dive into that for a minute. How have you bounced back?
Yeah.
Which I think I know the answer to that question. But how? Like, how have you not let that become your narrative?
I went to a couple friends, Matt and Deanne were one of them, a friend of mine in the East Coast, a former pastor of mine who helps other pastors. I called him and he said, he flew out 2 days later.
Nice.
When I was at the worst of my hurting, and said, I'm going to spend a week with you. And he helped me see. He said, Gary, you believe in the doctrine of total depravity of man. You believe man are born in sin and have a sin nature. You believe that in your head, but not in your heart. You think everybody's good and nobody will hurt you, and nobody and so you don't set any boundaries. And so, again, like we talked about in our last episode, is our suffering actually becomes a strengthening point.
Right.
You know, our pain becomes our beauty. As you've mentioned that to me. Our pain becomes, it's almost like, why do I in this pain? Well, that's going to, you look at the place where Satan attacks you, and you're going to find out where your glory is, your beauty is, and stuff. And so my vulnerability was one of my strengths, and the enemy tried to destroy that. But I learned not to. But I also then at the same time was able to, okay, I got to set better boundaries.
Wisdom.
Wisdom. The pulpit is not a confessional. It's not a place to unload your pain, and you got to find another place to get the healing and the camaraderie of brothers in Christ, and then go out from there. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think, to the both of you then, like, what were the steps? I think as a pastor is listening to this, or leaders listening to this, a kingdom leader, whoever's listening to this right now is going, this is all really, really great conversation, guys. Really, but practically.
Yeah, how do I apply this?
How do I apply this? How do I get to a place of swallowing my pride and asking, what does asking for help look like? I mean, I've never done that, so I can share some stories. I'd love to hear from you too as well. Like what was you said, 94 was cancer. And then, like what was it for you that said, okay, enough's enough. It's time to ask for help, and I'm going to do it.
I mean, I know we were talking about how do you keep from getting a big head when people come up to you and blah, blah, blah. And I used to this isn't really answering your question, but it's making me think of something that if I don't say it, I won't remember.
Nice.
Shiny. I'm that OCD guy all the way. But I was thinking about some of the stuff that has happened in my life and how I've dealt with those things. Like when, growing up as a young teenager, I mean, I had people saying, you're like the greatest singer I've ever heard. Things like that. I mean, come on. They've heard a lot of singers and they think I'm the greatest. How does that not get in there and mess with you a little bit? But I just, I decided a lot of years ago, because I would hear other artists go, oh, it's the Lord, bro, hey, no, it's all him, and I went, wow, what a crock. These people are just blowing smoke out their nose, and I thought, I don't want to be that. So what's the honest answer to that? How do I come back to that when somebody says, man, you got such a great voice. You are just awesome. I can't believe, I heard you 3 years ago. My wife and I, blah, got married, did your song was played at the, all these accolades, all these things. And you know what I say to them? I say, thank you. That's it. It's him. Of course it's him.
Right.
But it's like, that's so goofy to me when people do that. It's not genuine.
Yeah. When that person last week said, you sing better even than Matthew Ward. I said, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Well, that happens to him all the time. All the time.
Yeah, which is the total opposite. I can't sing a lick.
Yeah, he's really not I can't preach much either.
Yeah, and that's a good way to, I think you hit that right on the head.
Yeah.
It's having a right understanding and the right response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, thanks.
What's your response to your own question?
I think...
Since I can't answer.
No.
I'm
coming back to you. No, I'm just kidding.
You're not getting off that easy.
I really think it's having a right understanding of who we are in line of who Christ is, and when it doesn't line up, we can't fix it on our own. But I also think I ask myself the question: who do I want to be for my kids, and who do I want to be for my wife? And if it's this person that's got it all together, I want my kids to see me struggle and then watch me figure it out. I want my kids to see me fail and then come back and apologize. So I think for me at least, it starts with those that are closest around me. And I've not done this perfectly by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm like, I don't need really to go to counseling. I'm a therapist. I can figure it out. But then I'm like, but my 13-year-old's watching, and she knows that I'm struggling right now. And so I want her to see me.
How do I deal with it?
Reach out to somebody else, and ask for help. And so it's kind of how I've lived in the last probably 13, 14 years. Before that, it was I would hit rock bottom and go, oh, I probably should go get some help.
Get some help now.
Before and so that wasn't very healthy, and so
And
I
it takes much longer to get back on the other
does.
side of the rail. You know?
Absolutely. So that's how I'd answer it.
Yeah, well, that's good.
And because when we understand that most of the learning that we do is by watching others, and I'm realizing I've got a 13, 8, and 9-month-old at home, like, okay, there's a lot of eyes on me.
Can be motivating. Yeah. So your question was what do you do when
what are some practical steps
to get your own
support,
personal
help.
care support? Yeah. Well, I think seeing your kids, I think that's so wonderful. And what you're saying too is just be truthful to people and accept the fact that you have some gifts and talents. And for me, I think it would be to say to find somebody. My friend Pastor Tim Delino from New York, we talk about this all the time. We sometimes we'll wave and go like, you got your 5.
Yeah.
And basically, Tim told me one time, he said, without thinking, as fast as you can, name 5 people in your life that know you deeply, like they know all your junk. And I went 1, 2, 3. And he goes, okay, now it can't be your wife and kids. Oh. And I went, okay, and I got 4 kids and a wife, so Matt. And it's like I had one person in my life. Yeah. And so that's probably been a decade or more or so ago. So there's been a aggressive work on my life. Okay, now I probably got 10 or 15 people in my life, which
huge.
Is but they're not necessarily people that I co-work with, or as a pastor, they're not necessarily elders in my church.
Sure.
I think there's a certain amount of openness that team of elders needs to have with one another. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're dealing with issues, I probably would recommend you take it outside the church.
That's what I've noticed, that the times that I've had some of the biggest struggles for me, and some of the people I've taken those things to are not people that I think of as peers in the sense that we do the same thing, or that we're on the same level.
Yep.
I mean, I've got a friend who's used to be a mayor and he's a contractor, right? Great guy, super smart. I'll go talk to him. Dude, what do you think about this? Because I'm not, and he'll just rattle off things that I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah.
So you get out of the typical, I think if I just went to another Christian artist, or even a pastor, I would be looking for the answer that I hope they would give me.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And a lot of us do that, right?
Yeah. Instead of looking for maybe a resolve to something that I wasn't.
Or truth.
Or truth, even. Yeah. Maybe truth a little. I'm not into truth that much, but I guess it has its place.
Yeah.
But absolutely, yeah. So I think when you get outside your box, I think that's when you're going to get input that has nothing to do with what you think the person should be telling you.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I'm going to shameless plug here for a second, but that's why I'm so passionate about what we're doing at My Hope and My Hope Global with the counseling network. Because I think a lot of pastors are going to go, that's great.
Yeah.
Outside my box.
Yep.
I don't know who to call or who I can trust to call, because I always say the best thing you can do if you don't have anybody, if you don't have those 5, the best thing you do is hire a paid friend, which would be a counselor.
Right.
But you want to find somebody that's at least is in the same direction as you, whether faith-wise or that kind of stuff. So, the My Hope Counseling Network is a great way to start with that. Is just to reach out and find a Christian counselor that you could at least interview. And I always tell people that are looking for counseling, give yourself some grace, and it's probably the 3rd counselor that you'll find. You'll call 3, you might meet with 2 of them and go, it's the 3rd one usually that sticks. Yeah. So don't throw the towel in after the first one. Yeah. But right, I mean, because I'm challenged by your statement of 5 people. I don't know if I have that right now. I probably
if you can go that quick, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right. So I think it's
because a lot of them are in our field would be coworkers. You with Mayfield clinics before you had a large staff, and those probably aren't necessarily people you would go and tell your deepest, darkest secrets to.
Nope.
But there has to be some place to it. And I think you're right at My Hope having a setup for that. And we're doing some pastors' conferences as well that people can come to. They're going to be all across the country this year, 2022. And we're going to deal with some of these issues. We'd speak to some of the deeper issues of the heart. And so there's some hope there. But even that, I know personally, like you and I have been talking about this, I can get a little frustrated. It could be anywhere from 100 to 1,000 pastors, sometimes even more, at an event. But it's more they're listening to a lecture, and sometimes you get a hallway conversation or prayer over lunch. But so we're praying together about maybe doing some small retreats. Just get 3 or 4 couples together and have an intensive day or 2 with them. Because I think we have some of these issues that we're talking about today, where we're going to be vulnerable, or these wounds of our heart need to be brought to light and healed, and then God, it's not just getting rid of the problems of the past; it's creating the future that God has for you.
Well, and this is where I would ask practically, for a pastor or a leader that's listening, is pull out a journal and ask yourself this question: how am I doing? Mm-hmm. And then write for a while, and then ask the question again: how am I doing, really?
Yeah.
And then continue to write, because I think we'll lie to ourselves. I'm doing,
That's not that
the
bad.
right answer. This is a journal that nobody else is going to look at, maybe except for your counselor. But it's really asking yourselves, how's my soul? How's my heart? How's my mind? How are my intentions? How are, my desires? And then after you do that, go, how's my wife's heart?
Yeah.
Or my husband's heart? How are my children's hearts and minds and souls? And that's, I think, really where we pour into. I know a lot of those of us that are, there's the similarities, I think, and we could talk about with, being in leadership to, being on the stage and pastor, all that kind of stuff, is we pour, there's the temptation or the distraction of pouring so much into those that are coming to see us versus our own families.
Right.
And so what is, so asking pastors and leaders to really take stock of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we have teenagers, we can't control everything that they do.
No.
We can't, when they're adults, we can't,
responsible to them, but not for them.
Exactly. And so, but that's going to, I think, open up a lot. That could be overwhelming. That's why it's good to have a spiritual director. I love the idea that you've got a pastor that you can call and he'd fly out 2 days later to take care of you.
That's pretty awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it's rare, but needs to be more. It's like I think denominations could learn from that to say, let's have some men and women on our staff that are available to these crisis times.
Or not even on staff, maybe having an organization that can say, hey,
that's even better,
we're not there for the day-to-day.
We couldn't pay enough staff to
but we're going to, when something happens, we'll come in and be with you.
Yeah.
So there's that safety.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
well, it's a question for you guys. Would it be similar in your field if you go to a conference with other therapists, or you go to a music conference? Do they sit around the table and tend to talk like pastors do, like my church grew from 200 to 400? Our income's up this year. I added 3 new staff members. Or is it in a different world? Do they say, yeah, my soul's hurting?
No. When I go to conferences with other therapists, it's like, oh, tell me about your group practice. How many clients do you see a month?
Okay, so it's the same thing.
And versus, tell me about a great story of change and transformation that you saw this week, or and I think that's just human nature. You know? Well, I did 1.5 million this year. Did you do that? And I think really in the grant, who cares? But
I think for me, it's in that circle of artists. I think it depends on what they've been through and how long they've been doing it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Is totally changes the conversation.
Yeah.
I won't have the same conversation with a guy that's been doing it for 2 years, young guy, and maybe he's leading worship at his church, or he's starting to get a record deal, or he's starting to, I won't have the same conversations with him as I'll have with Phil Kagi or Randy Stonehill or Paul Clark or Nancy Honeytree or any of these people that have been doing it for 50 years. We're going to have different conversations. Those conversations are usually more heart conversations.
Sure.
And the younger ones are the more, how do I do and get better? And I reached this many people, or that concert sucked because of this. I don't talk that way with these other artists. It's all about what is God doing?
That makes sense.
But those deeper conversations you're having with those people that have that rich history with God.
Oh yeah.
And they've dealt with it.
And they've all been through.
They've had friends.
Oh yeah.
That's different than, because I think you've met other people, and I met them in the pastoral care. They're 50, 60 years old, and they feel like an utter failure because they didn't get that record contract, or they didn't get the big mega church, was never accomplished. The book contract fell through. They never wrote the best-selling, Christian self-help books. And so, so they go. There's 2 trajectories. One is like, all my pain and sorrow and suffering has been for the glory of God, and I've learned from that, and I've grown. And all my victories are to the glory of God. Where the other ones, like they live for the idol of fame and success.
Yeah.
Didn't get it, and now they're miserable. And
Bitter
they're
No, I mean,
empty.
I can think. I'm not going to name him, but it's a guy I know, and he's been doing it forever, and he's never really had the accolades that I think he probably should have had. He's a great singer. He's a decent artist, and he puts it out there pretty well. But I remember one day I was in the studio working with him on something for somebody else, and he goes, "Well, Matt, I'm just God's best kept secret, apparently." And I thought, wow, what a weird.
Some bitterness there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I thought, boy, I don't want to be that ever.
Yeah.
I want to be I want to be silent if that's what God wants me to be, and I want to speak up if that's what He wants me to do.
Yeah.
And I think the key is obedience at every turn.
Right. Yeah. And having a right like you said, having a right understanding.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with what I think is best for my career right now. It's what does God think is best for me right now.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge.
And my wife and I have walked through seasons like that where it would just totally seemed illogical. Walked away from a record deal with a company, and they wanted me to do another record like how I was supposed to do and like I'd been doing, this kind of rock stuff. And I'd just gone through cancer, and I felt like the Lord told me, you need to speak to this. And I did an album and the record company didn't want me to do it. And so I left the company, and my wife and I sold that record out of our house. And because we were obedient, I felt like because we mortgaged our house to pay for it. I mean, all this stuff went out on a limb, and it was probably probably my biggest selling project.
That's awesome.
Because God was in it. He goes, do this. And I went, okay. Was I scared? Yeah. Was it stepping out of the boat to walk a little bit on the water? Absolutely was. But once I realized, it's just wet, that gave me the strength and the faith to keep going. I didn't sink like Peter did, but thought about it a few times. But it was interesting. I'm just saying that because a lot of times we think we have the answers to how we're supposed to proceed. God just laughs at us, I think.
Well, and I'm sure you probably had good people speaking in.
Oh, yeah.
Listening, speaking in, right?
And what the record company was saying was probably not, it was correct. Right. It was logical from a business standpoint.
Yeah, not from a heart.
But not from God's business standpoint. He wanted me to totally unplug and do this whole other thing. And I went, wow, really? So I did it, and it was...
I love that.
As you say that, I don't know if there's cameras over here. I don't think so. You're tearing up. You're getting. There's emotion behind what you're saying, which shows to me not all tears are signs of depth, but yours are, and it shows that. It shows me like something exciting as we talk about kingdom leaders. You can be fruitful and have a dynamic ministry that touches thousands and thousands of lives, and yet still go deep and still be healed and still be whole and still be vibrant and still be alive. And at our age, this young whippersnapper here, we need to speak into his life over the next few years. But at our age, we get to be I'm calling a true elder, not in the sense of you've been assigned this office at a church, and so you help with the budget and with the building program, but you've matured, you've grown, you've developed, and now you have something to say. And I think younger generation, I could be wrong, but are kind of looking for some people, out of those 5 friends you talk about. It'd be nice to have one of them that's 10, 15, 20 years older than you.
Oh, yeah.
We're having a hard time finding anybody that's still alive at that age. but 5, 10 years down the road, a little bit better. So I think these are some things, getting a counselor, checking out My Hope for a lot of the resources that could help. World Challenge at our ministry, we have some stuff for pastors as well. Getting some friends in your life. Doing that journal thing, and that's so important. That's like I have you see me carrying all this stuff around. Some of it's my work stuff, but most of it's my personal work that I'm doing. I'm constantly, and it's not boast. It's just it's what keeps me alive. It's what keeps me fresh. It's what I believe gives me a word from the Lord when I stand up to speak in front of people. Is that I've been in that secret closet, and so some of the stuff we're talking about is externally, like you can help me and this team can help me, but a lot of it is. Me in that secret closet alone with the Lord, just pouring my heart out to Him, telling Him everything I feel, my brokenness, my pride, my selfishness to the Lord. And this is who I am, and this, and please help me. And that does a deep work in us.
Well, it goes back to everything we talked about in the first 2 episodes too. That we're talking about other people, but apply that to themselves,
Yeah.
And it's, and I think that what I've been hearing with both of you is having that right understanding that we're not the one that sustains these things. It's the Lord that sustains them or doesn't. And it's not us to keep them going. And I think that a lot of the traps and the lies is that we have to be bigger, better, faster, stronger versus really diving into the heart and the soul.
And you know the difference, don't you? You know the difference when one person could walk up right after the next, and the first person could be, well, this actually happened to me. I'll tell you. I was in South America, and a guy, beautiful, suit on and dark sunglasses, and an entourage walking up the stage. And he reaches out his hand and says, "I'm the pastor of the largest church in the city." And I said, "Do you have a name?" And he's like, "Because I want to know you, not your accolades." And then I was having lunch, and there was this, all the important pastors down here, and there was this one pastor, and he had this kind of old, frayed thing, and nobody was talking to him. And he looked like he was sort of an outcast. And I said, "Are you?" Well, I'm embarrassed to say it. The first thing I asked him was like, "Do you help one of the? Are you a driver for one of these guys?" Because some of them had their drivers with them. And he goes, "No, I'm a pastor." And I said, "Well, where do you pastor?" He goes, "Well, I help lead other churches." And I said, "Oh, how many churches?" And he goes, 13,000. And I'm like, "Excuse me?" I said, 13,000. And I said, "How many people is that?" It's close to 1.5 million. I'm the bishop overseeing these people. Humble, elderly man who just was gentle as could be. Who do you think I want to spend time with?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like, who do I want to grow under? Who do I want to become like when I grow up? And unfortunately, I think a lot of kingdom leaders, we set our models of the fastest growing church. Okay, well, I'll get on all their podcasts and listen to all that stuff, and then therefore the soul care we're talking about today doesn't become an agenda. It doesn't become. It's almost like, pastors who, I read this thing. I'm going to skip around here, but like 80% of pastors are overweight. And so I was like, oh my goodness, it's like we're not caring for our bodies, we're not caring for our minds, we're not caring for our soul, we're not caring for our family. We're only caring for this one idol in our life of a big kingdom, building our own kingdom and ministry, and that's got to be crushed. We either crush it ourselves, or the Holy Spirit will come and crush us in kindness. And that's one of the kindest things the Lord ever did to me was bring my kingdom down to where I was like in the ashes and just saying, "Okay, God, you rebuild my life the way you want it to be." Yeah,
I love that. Well, as we finish up, I just want to, you want to just share how people can get a hold of you at your website, and then we'll talk about My Hope and, getting a hold of you as well.
Yeah. First of all, I'd say I think it's been a unique 3 episodes we've had together here. And we're going to share some of these resources, some on my podcast, the Gary Wilkerson podcast. Some will be available on My Hope, and you're going to be putting it on your Facebook as well, the Matthew Ward Facebook.
Probably my website too.
And your website as well. So we're kind of sharing this resource, and it might be packaged for each of our ministries different ways. So this is a very unique setting. But secondly, I'd say what's unique about this is, as we're talking somewhat about kingdom leaders, you've helped me develop this desire from my heart to see a renovation of the heart of kingdom leaders. And it's interesting because we're all 3 in the kingdom, and we're all 3 leaders, but in different aspects of it. Probably could put a businessman, although I think you're a businessman. We could put a businessman at the table and have somewhat of all 4 corners of ministry leadership at the table here. So I think it's been unique to take, and surprising for me as well. I think I was surprised at your guys' answers that at your conferences you would get the same results. I thought that was just pastors. But again, the flesh is the flesh. And so anyway, long answer for the question of getting a hold of us. Worldchallenge.org is our website, and our podcasts are mostly found on YouTube, I think, but on our website you can find them as well, the Gary Wilkerson podcast. And again, we're doing this new emphasis, this new series. I hope we join in this kind of venue again together, hopefully real soon and real often in the idea of the renovation of the heart for kingdom leaders. Yeah,
for me, I have a website, MatthewWard.com. Had it forever. So there'll be things on that. And also I have like 3 or 4 different Facebook accounts, but pick one. And I've got my fan one, nice. That's one I usually visit more. And I'm not even sure how to access that. Just look me up. Nice. Matthew
Find
Ward.
It. Yep.
Facebook guy.
And you can still get your albums and stuff on
my website,
iTunes, or on your website.
I'm mostly on iTunes. Most of them is all digital downloads now.
Yeah.
But it's kind of fun when you get sent the resource from. Sometimes people can get some of my books on Amazon or other sources, but when they write World Challenge and say, "Can you please send me Gary's book about God's favor?" I was like, I always feel good about that.
Oh, that's
it is fun to reach out.
Grab some of your albums.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and then check out myhopeglobal.com to get resource to counselors, Christian counselors. We're excited about that. And then if you want to know more information about me, just go to drmayfield.com or drmayfield.com. drmayfield.com and check out the resources there as well.
Well, it's been great to be with you guys. Thanks. Been 3 brilliant episodes. I think these are some of my favorite talks we've had together, and talked on some deep issues. If you missed any of the episodes, I want to encourage you to go back and catch all 3 of these, because I think they have some synergy to them that would be important. So, Dr. Mayfield, if you would come back and join us again, and Mr. Matt, I always love you being in the studio.
Sure.
Check out one of Matt's previous talks we did, where he was talking a lot about family and some of the crises. We talked about suffering here, and then we more recently we did an episode together in the Gary Wilkerson podcast, and it was really important, really good work, and thank you for doing that. So thanks for joining us. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful day.
Each week, this podcast reaches thousands of listeners. This critical work is made possible by the generous contributions of individuals like you who believe in World Challenge's mission. Thank you for listening and supporting World Challenge, transforming lives through the message and mission of Jesus Christ.